I was the founding CTO who built the company's algorithm from scratch, but the new CEO saw me as a budget line item. He fired me exactly 24 hours before my $6 million options vested to save money. He didn't realize that his greed triggered a hidden clause that would instantly double my payout and bankrupt him. Before this story continues, tell me, where are you watching from today and what's the temperature? I'd love to know. Get comfortable, because this CEO is about to learn that reading the fine print is a $12 million skill. If you looked closely at the reflection in my monitor, you could see the dark circles under my eyes. They were badges of honor, earned over 7 years of sleepless nights, caffeine overdoses, and the kind of stress that makes your hair thin. I was 34, but I felt 50. I was Brooklyn Bailey, the founding CTO of EtherStream, and I was currently staring at a line of code that was worth roughly $500 million. But today, my eyes weren't glued to the syntax. They kept drifting to the bottom right corner of my screen. The date. October 14th. A small, golden notification icon sat on my calendar for tomorrow, October 15th. It simply read, Vesting Cliff. In the startup world, that little notification was the holy grail. It meant that the massive block of stock options granted to me when we were just 3 people in a garage was finally, fully mine. At the current valuation, those options were worth $6 million. It was life-changing money. It was buy a house in the hills and never code another line unless I want to money. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee, savoring the anticipation. I had survived the lean years, the server crashes, and the endless pivots. I had survived the transition from a scrappy family to a corporate machine. And most importantly, I had survived Cooper Peterson. Cooper was our CEO. He wasn't a founder, he was an acquisition. He came in after our Series C funding, installed by the board to adult supervise us. Cooper was 40 war suits that cost more than my first car and had a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was all buzzwords and optics. He called employees human capital and referred to layoffs as strategic recalibrations. He hated me. I knew it, he knew it. We were oil and water. I cared about product stability, he cared about quarterly projections. I cared about the engineers, he cared about the share price. But he couldn't fire me. I was the only one who truly understood the architecture of the core algorithm. Or so I thought. At 4:45 p.m., a calendar invite popped up on my screen, overriding my code editor. Subject: Quick Sync. Host: Cooper Peterson. Location: the Fishbowl Main Conference Room. Time: 5:00 p.m. My stomach did a slow roll. A 5:00 p.m. meeting on a Friday was never good news. In the corporate world, that time slot was reserved for bad news that you wanted to bury over the weekend. I looked around the open plan office. The engineering team was in high spirits, cracking open beers for the weekly happy hour. The hum of conversation and the clack of mechanical keyboards usually soothed me, but now the noise felt distant, muffled by the sudden pounding of my heart. "Hey, Brooklyn," one of my senior devs, Mike, called out, tossing a stress ball my way. "You joining us for a round of Halo? We're celebrating the patch rollout." I caught the ball, forcing a smile. "Maybe later, Mike. Cooper wants a quick sync." Mike's face fell slightly. "On a Friday? Gross. Don't let him talk you into working the weekend again." "I won't," I said, placing the ball on my desk. I stood up and smoothed out my jeans. I wasn't wearing a power suit. I was wearing a hoodie and sneakers because I actually did work. I grabbed my phone, leaving my laptop open. The cursor blinked next to the vesting date notification. October 15th. Just one more day, just 24 hours until I was safe, until I had leverage. I walked toward the Fishbowl, the glass-walled conference room at the center of the office. Cooper was already there. He was standing with his back to the door, looking out at the city skyline, hands clasped behind his back like he was posing for a business magazine cover. Sitting at the table was Sandra, the head of HR. She refused to make eye contact with me as I approached the glass door. She was staring intently at a manila folder in front of her knuckles white as she gripped a pen. That was the tell, the smoking gun. You don't bring HR to a quick sink unless you're about to ruin someone's day. I took a deep breath, the air conditioning suddenly feeling freezing against my skin. I opened the door. You wanted to see me, Cooper, I asked, keeping my voice steady. Cooper turned around. His face was a mask of practiced regret, the kind he probably rehearsed in the mirror. Brooklyn, he said, his voice smooth and devoid of warmth. Please take a seat. I didn't sit, I stood. My ground crossing my arms. I prefer to stand. What's this about? Cooper sighed, unbuttoning his suit jacket as he sat down, trying to assert dominance from a relaxed posture. We have to make some difficult decisions, Brooklyn. The board is pushing for a leaner operation before the Q4 earnings call. We need to optimize our burn rate. I felt a cold prickle of dread at the base of my neck. Optimize burn rate? We just hit record user growth. The platform is stable. It is, Cooper agreed, picking up a pen and twirling it. Thanks to you, you've built a wonderful system. A self-sustaining system, really, which brings us to today. He looked at Sandra. She finally looked up, her eyes filled with apology. Brooklyn, Cooper said, dropping the act. Effective immediately, your employment with EthaStream is terminated. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Terminated. For a second, I didn't breathe. The ambient noise of the office outside, the laughter, the ping of Slack notifications, seemed to vanish, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. You're firing me? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I built this company, Cooper. I wrote the code that pays for that suit. Cooper's expression didn't flicker. And we are grateful for your service. But the company has evolved. We need a CTO with more corporate scalability. We've already found your replacement. He starts Monday. Monday, I repeated, the timing clicking into place like a puzzle piece. You're doing this today because of tomorrow. Cooper raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. Tomorrow. My options, I said, stepping closer to the table. My $6 million in stock options vest tomorrow, October 15th. Cooper chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Brooklyn, this is purely a budgetary decision. The company needs to save money, your salary is high, and your equity package is substantial. By terminating you today, those unvested options return to the company pool. It's simple math. We save $6 million in equity liability instantly. It's nothing personal, it's just business. Just business, I echoed. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it could melt the glass walls around us. You think stealing $6 million from a founder is just business? It's not stealing, Sandra interjected softly, sliding a piece of paper across the table. It's policy. Since you are being terminated before the vesting date, the options are forfeit. We have prepared a severance package. 3 months of salary, provided you sign a non-disparagement agreement. I looked at the paper. Separation agreement. I looked at Cooper. He looked bored. He checked his expensive watch. I have a dinner reservation at 6, Brooklyn. Let's make this quick. Hand over your badge and laptop. Security will escort you out. Security, I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. I know everyone in this building. I hired half of them. Standard procedure, Cooper said, standing up. We can't risk a disgruntled former employee sabotaging the code. He walked over to the door and signaled to someone outside. 2 uniformed security guards, men I didn't recognize, likely contractors hired just for this, stepped into the room. Escort Ms. Bailey to her desk to collect her personal effects, then to the exit, Cooper ordered. I looked at him one last time. He looked triumphant. He thought he had won. He thought he had saved the budget and cleared the board for his own payday. He saw a young woman in a hoodie who he could bully out of her fortune. He had no idea who he was dealing with. You're making a mistake, Cooper, I said, my voice steady now. A very expensive mistake. Cooper smirked. I think I can afford it. The budget looks much better without you on it. I turned to Sandra. I want a copy of my original employment contract, the one I signed 5 years ago. Sandra blinked. It's in the digital archive. I can email it to your personal address. Do it now, I demanded. Send it, Cooper waved his hand dismissively. Let her read it and weep. It's ironclad. I walked out of the fishbowl, the 2 guards flanking me like I was a criminal. The office had gone silent. Mike, my lead developer, stood up, his beer forgotten in his hand. Brooklyn, he asked, confusion written all over his face. What's going on? I couldn't look at him. If I looked at him, I would cry, and I refused to give Cooper the satisfaction of seeing tears. I'm out, Mike, I said, keeping my eyes on my desk. Take care of the code. The walk to my desk felt like a funeral procession. The open-plan office, usually a place of collaboration and energy, was now a gauntlet of stairs. Whispers erupted in my wake. I could feel the confusion and fear radiating from my team. They knew that if the founder could be dragged out by security, none of them were safe. I reached my desk, the same desk I had sat at for 12 hours. A day for the last 3 years. It was covered in artifacts of my life, a photo of my parents, a world's okayest coder mug, a stack of technical manuals. One of the guards tossed a flattened cardboard box onto my keyboard. Personal items only, ma'am. No hard drives, no company documents, no notebooks. I unfolded the box, my fingers numb. I started placing things inside. The photo, the mug, a dried succulent I had managed to keep alive for 2 years. My laptop was still open. The cursor was still blinking next to the calendar. October 15th. I reached for the laptop to close it, but the guard's hand shot out, blocking me. Device stays, ma'am. I need to log out of my personal accounts, I said, my voice tight. It will wipe it remotely, the guard said robotically. Move along. I grabbed my backpack from under the desk. I shoved the cardboard box under one arm. I looked around the office one last time. This was my life's work. The architecture of the servers, the culture of the dev team, even the choice of ergonomic chairs, it was all me. And now I was being erased. Cooper was watching from the fishbowl, arms crossed, a smug satisfaction on his face. He was enjoying this. He liked the power trip. I walked toward the elevators. The heavy glass doors slid open, and I stepped inside, the guards crowding in with me. As the doors closed, cutting off the view of the office, the first tear finally escaped and rolled down my cheek. I angrily wiped it away. Don't you dare, I told myself, don't you dare break. The elevator descended, the numbers counting down. 1098. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the email from Sandra. Subject, employment contract copy. I didn't check it yet. I waited until the guards walked me to the front revolving doors, stripped me of my access badge, and watched me step out onto the cold, gray sidewalk. The city noise rushed in, horns, sirens, the chatter of pedestrians. I stood there on the curb, holding a box of junk, feeling the wind bite through my hoodie. I felt hollowed out, robbed. I sat down on a concrete bench nearby, ignoring the stares of passers-by. I pulled out my phone and opened the PDF attachment Sandra had sent. My hands trembled as I scrolled. I wasn't looking for the severance clause. I wasn't looking for the non-compete. I was looking for Section 8. Years ago, when we were negotiating the Series A funding, I had hired a friend from law school to look over my contract. He was paranoid, brilliant, and ruthless. He had insisted on a specific founder protection clause. At the time, the board had laughed at it, calling it unnecessary because we're all family here. But they signed it because they needed my code. I scrolled past the standard boilerplate text, page 4, page 5. There it was. Section 8, vesting acceleration upon involuntary termination. I read the paragraph, then I read it again, and then a smile, a cold, terrifying smile, slowly spread across my face. Clause 8.3. In the event that the executive is terminated without cause within 48 hours prior to a vesting cliff, all unvested options shall not be forfeited. Instead, they shall immediately vest at a value of 200% of the fair market value at the time of termination, payable in cash within 3 business days. Cooper thought he was saving $6 million in stock. He had just triggered a clause that required him to pay me $12 million in cash immediately. And I knew for a fact, based on the frantic budget meetings I'd sat in on last week, that the company didn't have $12 million in liquid cash. Cooper hadn't just fired me. He had just pulled the pin on a grenade and dropped it in his own lap. I closed the email, I picked up my box, I wasn't crying anymore. I took out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. "Carter," I said when he answered. "It's Brooklyn, I hope you still have that suit, we're going to war." My apartment was quiet. It was the kind of silence that usually terrified me, the silence of a Friday night with no plans, no server alerts, and no company to run. But tonight, the silence felt different. It felt like the calm before a demolition. I sat at my kitchen island, a slab of cold quartz that I'd bought with my first bonus check 3 years ago. The cardboard box from the office was dumped on the floor, its contents spilling out like gutted organs. But I wasn't looking at the box. I was looking at my iPad, zoomed in on Section 8 of the contract. I had read it 10 times. I needed to be sure. I needed to know that this wasn't a hallucination born of stress and grief. Payable in cash within 3 business days. I did the math again on a napkin. My options were valued at $6 million based on the last 409A valuation. 200% of that was $12 million. I knew EthaStream's financials better than the CFO. I had built the dashboards that tracked our burn rate. We had just closed a bridge round of funding, bringing in about $15 million to cover operations for the next 2 quarters. We had heavy server costs, payroll for 80 people, and a massive marketing spend Cooper had authorized for Q4. If I pulled $12 million out of the company on Monday, the company wouldn't just be over budget. It would be insolvent. Payroll would bounce. The server bills would go unpaid. The cloud providers would cut us off within 24 hours. Cooper had fired me to save $6 million in equity, phantom money that didn't affect the cash flow. In doing so, he had obligated the company to pay double that amount in hard cash. Why hadn't he seen it? I closed my eyes and pictured the negotiations 5 years ago. We were small then. Desperate. The investors were sharks. My lawyer friend, Carter, had inserted Section 8 as a poison pill. It was a standard defense against a hostile takeover, designed to make it too expensive to fire the founders just to steal their equity. But Cooper wasn't a founder. He hadn't been there. And when he took over, he likely had his expensive lawyers review the current executive contracts, not the founding documents deeply buried in the legacy legal files. He saw at-will employment and stopped reading. He saw the vesting date and got greedy. He was playing checkers. I had been playing 4D chess since 2018. I went to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of cheap white wine. I poured a glass, my hand steady now. The sheer incompetence of it was staggering. Cooper was so focused on the optics, on looking like the ruthless cost cutter for the board, that he forgot the cardinal rule of engineering: check dependencies. You never delete a line of code without knowing what it connects to. He had just deleted me, the root user, and he had no idea he'd just initiated the self-destruct sequence. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mike. "Mike, the team is in shock. Cooper sent an email saying you decided to pursue other opportunities. We know it's BS. We're meeting at O'Halloran's. Come drink with us." I stared at the screen. I wanted to go. I wanted to rage with them, to tell them everything. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I tipped my hand now, if word got back to Cooper that I was happy, he might get suspicious. He might have his lawyers check the file. He might try to conjure up cause for the firing retroactively to void the clause. I needed him to think I was defeated. I needed him to think I was at home, crying into a pillow, powerless and broken. I typed back, "Can't tonight, Mike. I need some time. Keep the ship afloat for me." I set the phone down. The isolation stung, but it was necessary. I looked at the clock, 7:30 p.m. I had one call to make. I had already left a voicemail for Carter, but I needed to hear his voice. I needed the surgeon to tell me that the scalpel was sharp. Carter Morgan didn't work in a glass tower. He ran his own boutique firm out of a converted warehouse in the meatpacking district. He liked the aesthetic, exposed brick, industrial beams, and artwork that looked like it cost more than my apartment. He said it intimidated the corporate drones who came to negotiate settlements. He agreed to meet me at 9:00 p.m. Not at his office, but at a dimly lit jazz bar in the West Village called the Blue Note. When I walked in, the air was thick with the smell of old wood, expensive cologne, and saxophone music. Carter was sitting in a corner booth, wearing a velvet blazer that would have looked ridiculous on anyone else. On him, it looked dangerous. He stood up as I approached, his sharp eyes scanning my face. He didn't hug me. Carter wasn't a hugger. He shook my hand with a grip that could crush walnuts. "Brooklyn," he said, his voice a low baritone. "You look like you've been dragged through a server rack." "I feel like it," I admitted, sliding into the booth. "You got the file." "I pulled it from the archives the second you called," Carter said. He tapped a leather briefcase next to him. "I haven't looked at this since we drafted it. I forgot how aggressive I was back then." "Is it valid?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "Can he wiggle out of it?" Carter signaled the waitress and ordered 2 whiskeys, neat. He waited until she left before answering. "Valid," Carter laughed softly. "Brooklyn, it's a masterpiece. It's a standard golden parachute with a twist, specifically the definitions of cause. Did he accuse you of theft, gross negligence, felonious behavior?" "No," I said. "He said budgetary reasons. He said restructuring. I have witnesses. Sandra from HR was there." "Perfect," Carter smiled, showing perfectly straight white teeth. "That's without cause. And the timing, you said today was the 14th. "Yes, vesting is tomorrow, the 15th. Section 8.3 triggers if terminated within 48 hours of a cliff," Carter recited from memory. "He fired you inside the kill zone. It's black and white. There is no gray area here. He owes you due." Bleh. The drinks arrived. Carter took a sip, his eyes gleaming. "Here is what happens," Carter said, leaning in. "Cooper thinks the clock has stopped. He thinks you're gone and the equity is back in the pool. He's probably already emailed the board to tell them he saved $6 million. He's popping champagne." "He was going to a dinner reservation when I left," I said, remembering his dismissive wave. "Good, let him eat," Carter said. "We do nothing this weekend. We let the termination process on HR's side finalize. We let the vesting date pass tomorrow. We let the system record that you were terminated 1 day prior. We lock in the timeline." And then, Monday morning at 9:00 a.m., I walk into his office, Carter said. "Not with a lawsuit. We don't need a lawsuit yet. I walk in with a demand for payment under the terms of the contract. We give him 24 hours to wire $12 million to your account, or we file a suit that will become public record." If it becomes public, I realized, the board will see it. The investors will see it. And the SEC might get curious why a CEO is hiding massive liabilities, Carter added. "It's a death sentence for his career. He will pay. He has to." I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. "He doesn't have the cash, Carter, the company. If he pays this, EtherStream might go under. The liquidity isn't there." Carter stopped smiling. He looked at me with intense seriousness. "Brooklyn, he fired you. He tried to cheat you out of the reward for years of your life. He didn't care if you went under. Why do you care if his balance sheet bleeds?" "Because of the team," I whispered. "Mike, Sarah, the devs." "The team will be fine," Carter said firmly. "Talent finds a way. But you have to be willing to burn the village to save the castle. Do you want the money, or do you want to be a martyr?" I thought about Cooper's smirk, just business. I want the money, I said hard. Then we drink, Carter said, raising his glass. To Section 8. Saturday was the longest day of my life. Per Carter's instructions, I went radio silent. I turned off my phone. I didn't log into LinkedIn. I didn't check my email. I stayed in my apartment, pacing the floorboards until I had worn a path in the rug. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to do something, to fight back immediately, to scream from the rooftops. But I knew the strategy. The silent strategy. Silence makes people confident. Silence makes bullies think their victims have rolled over. By staying quiet, I was confirming Cooper's bias, that I was just a nerd who didn't know how to fight in the real world. I spent the day cleaning my apartment. I scrubbed the grout in the shower with a toothbrush. I reorganized my bookshelf by color. I was channeling my anxious energy into manual labor because my brain was running at 1,000 miles an hour. I imagined what was happening at the office. The weekend crew would be there. They'd see my empty desk. Rumors would be flying. Cooper wouldn't be there. He never worked weekends. He was probably at his country club, hitting golf balls, telling his buddies how he trimmed the fat at the company. The thought of him golfing, while I scrubbed my bathroom floor, made my blood boil. Sunday. I turned my phone on briefly to check the time. 10:00 a.m. A notification from my bank app popped up. Direct deposit, $4,200, my final paycheck, plus the severance payout. They had processed it fast. Sandra was efficient. I looked at the deposit details. Final settlement. They thought it was over. The transaction was the final nail in the coffin of their defense. By paying me out, they had formally executed the termination. The timeline was locked. I screenshotted the deposit notification and emailed it to Carter. Subject: proof of termination. Body: the money is in, the clock is set. Carter replied 2 minutes later. Received, the demand letter is drafted. It's brutal. Get a good night's sleep. Wear something sharp tomorrow. We aren't going in through the back door. I spent Sunday night laying out my clothes. No hoodie, no sneakers. I pulled out a tailored black blazer I had bought for a keynote speech I gave last year. Sharp trousers. Leather boots with a heel that clicked ominously on hard floors. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like the tired coder from Friday. I looked like a CEO. I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing the confrontation in my head. I played out every scenario. What if he yells? What if he calls security again? Let him call security. Carter would eat them for breakfast. The sun rose on Monday morning, painting the sky in hues of violent orange and gray. It was October 17th. I drank my coffee black. I put on my sunglasses, even though it wasn't particularly bright out. I grabbed my bag. I wasn't going to work to write code. I was going to work to execute a query that would delete the user CooperPet. Urson from the database of my life. I walked out the door and hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. EthaStream headquarters, I said, and don't stop at the guest entrance. Pull up to the front. When the taxi pulled up to the glass-fronted EthaStream building, my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were steady. Standing on the sidewalk, adjusting his cufflinks, was Carter. He looked like a shark in a three-piece suit, carrying a slim leather portfolio that held the bomb we were about to drop. Ready? He asked, not looking at me but at the revolving doors. Ready, I said. We walked in. The receptionist, a sweet girl named Jenna who I'd hired fresh out of college, looked up and smiled instinctively, then froze. Her eyes darted from me to Carter, then down to her phone. Brooklyn, she stammered. Mr. Peterson said you weren't allowed. I'm here as a shareholder, Jenna, I said smoothly, not breaking stride. And this is my legal counsel. Is Cooper in? He's in the fishbowl, she whispered, with the board chairman. Carter and I exchanged a look. The chairman, even better. This wasn't just going to be an execution, it was going to be a public spectacle. We bypassed the security turnstiles. The guard stepped forward, recognizing me, conflict written on his face. "Ms. Bailey, I can't." Carter stepped in, handing the guard a business card without stopping. "This is a matter of corporate compliance regarding immediate shareholder liabilities. Unless you want to be named in an obstruction suit, I suggest you let us pass." The guard hesitated, looked at the card, and stepped back. Carter had that effect on people. We took the elevator up to the 4th floor. The doors opened to the familiar hum of the office, which instantly died as we stepped out. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. I walked down the main aisle, the click of my heels echoing like gunshots in the silence. Cooper was in the fishbowl, just as Jenna said. He was sitting across from Richard Sterling, the chairman of the board, a silver-haired titan of industry who didn't suffer fools. Cooper was laughing, pointing at a chart on the wall. He saw me through the glass. The laugh died in his throat. He stood up, his face flushing red with anger. He marched to the door and yanked it open. "What the hell is this?" Cooper hissed, keeping his voice low so Richard wouldn't hear. "You were escorted out, you're trespassing." "We're here to collect a debt," Carter said calmly, stepping past Cooper and into the room. Cooper spun around, panic flaring in his eyes as he realized we were invading his sanctuary with the chairman present. "Richard," Cooper said quickly, forcing a smile. "Apologies, a disgruntled former employee, I'll handle this." Richard looked at me, then at Carter. He didn't look annoyed, he looked curious. "Brooklyn, good to see you. Who is this?" "This is Carter Morgan," I said. "My attorney." "Attorney," Richard frowned. "Cooper, I thought the separation was amicable." "It is," Cooper insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. "Brooklyn, leave now." "Not until you read this," Carter said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the mahogany table toward Richard. Cooper lunged for it, but Richard was faster. He placed a heavy hand on the paper. "Let's see what this is about." Richard put on his reading glasses. The room was deadly silent. Cooper was practically vibrating with tension, his eyes darting between the paper and the door, calculating if he could call security before the bomb went off. "Demand for immediate payment," Richard read aloud, his voice neutral. "Pursuant to Employment Agreement Section 8, Clause 3, vesting acceleration, 200%. He stopped. He looked up at Cooper over the rim of his glasses. "Cooper," Richard said softly, "did you terminate Brooklyn on Friday?" "Yes," Cooper said, his voice tight. "To save the equity package. It was a strategic move, too." "Did you read her original contract?" Richard interrupted. "HR handled the details. It's standard." "It is not standard," Richard snapped. He looked back at the paper. "This says that termination without cause within 48 hours of a cliff triggers a double payout. In cash, immediately." Cooper scoffed, a nervous, jagged sound. "That's ridiculous. No contract says that. That's a bluff." "Here is the signed copy from 2018, Carter said, pulling the original document from his portfolio and placing it next to the demand letter. He pointed to the signature at the bottom. It was the previous chairman's signature. Valid, binding. Richard read the clause. His face went pale. He did the mental math instantly. $12 million, Richard whispered. He looked at Cooper with an expression of pure disbelief. "You fired her to save $6 million in paper money, and you just cost us $12 million in liquid cash." I didn't know," Cooper stammered. "HR didn't flag." "You're the CEO?" Richard roared, slamming his hand on the table. The sound made everyone outside the glass walls jump. "You don't fire a founder without reading the damn contract, Cooper." "It can't be valid," Cooper said, desperate now. "We'll fight it. We'll go to court. We can drag this out for years." "Actually," Carter interjected smoothly. "Clause 8.5 mandates binding arbitration if payment is not received within 3 business days. And if you force arbitration and lose, which you will, you are also liable for all legal fees and a 5% monthly penalty on the unpaid balance." Carter checked his watch. "You have until Wednesday at 5:00 p.m. to wire the funds, or the penalty clock starts. Richard looked at me. Brooklyn, surely we can work something out. A payment plan, reinstatement. I looked at Cooper. He looked small, defeated, but I wasn't done. I don't want reinstatement, I said coldly. And I don't want a payment plan. I want what is owed. But there's something else you should know, Richard. Something Cooper didn't tell you. Cooper's eyes went wide. Brooklyn, don't. Tell me, Richard commanded. Cooper wasn't just saving the budget, I said. Check the server logs from Friday night. 2 hours after he fired me, a massive data packet was prepped for transfer. Destination, OmniCorp. OmniCorp was our biggest competitor. He's selling the IP, I said. He's stripping the company for parts. The heir left the room. Selling the IP without board approval was not just a fireable offense, it was corporate espionage. It was criminal. Is this true? Richard asked, his voice dangerously low. No, she's lying, Cooper shouted. She's trying to sabotage me. I still have root access to the logs, Cooper, I lied. I didn't have access anymore, but he didn't know that for sure. Check the outgoing traffic. It's all there. Richard pulled out his phone. I'm calling the CTO of OmniCorp. I know him personally. If I find out you've been back-channeling a sale. Cooper sank into his chair. The fight went out of him. He knew he was cornered. Look, Cooper whispered, pleading now. We needed the cash. The liquidity is worse than you think. How much worse? Richard demanded. We don't have the 12 million, Cooper admitted, his head in his hands. We barely have 4. I moved the rest to a holding account to facilitate the OmniCorp deal. You embezzled operating funds to set up an illegal sale? Carter asked, his eyebrows raising. That's fraud, Cooper. That's prison time. Richard stood up. He looked at Cooper with disgust. Then he looked at me. Brooklyn, Richard said, if we pay you the 12 million, we are bankrupt. The company dies. 80 people lose their jobs on Wednesday. It was the moment of truth. The leverage was absolute. I had the gun to the company's head. I could pull the trigger, take my money, eventually, through bankruptcy court, and watch Etha stream burn. Or I could negotiate. I looked at Cooper, broken and sweating in his expensive suit. Then I looked out the glass wall at the office. I saw Mike. I saw Jenna. I saw the team I had built. I don't want to bankrupt the company, Richard, I said. I want my company back. Carter looked at me, surprised. This wasn't the plan. But he stayed silent, trusting me. Here is my offer, I said. I will waive the cash payout clause. I will accept the original stock vesting. On 3 conditions. Richard nodded slowly. Name them. 1, I said, pointing at Cooper. He is terminated immediately. For cause, no severance, no golden parachute. Cooper opened his mouth to protest, but Richard silenced him with a glare. Done. 2, I continued. I am reinstated as CEO, not CTO. CEO, I run the show. Richard didn't hesitate. Agreed. And 3, I said. Since Cooper tried to defraud the company, his unvested equity is forfeited. I want it distributed to the employee pool. Every single employee gets a bonus this quarter. Richard smiled, a genuine impressed smile. Brooklyn, welcome back. He turned to Cooper. Get out of my building. You'll hear from our lawyers regarding the fraud. Cooper stood up, shaky and pale. He looked at me one last time, hate burning in his eyes, but he said nothing. He walked out of the fishbowl, past the staring employees, past the security guard, and into oblivion. I stood there, my heart pounding. I had just walked in as a fired employee and walked out as the CEO. Carter leaned over and whispered, I only get 5% of stock, you know. I prefer cash. I laughed. I'll write you a personal check, Carter, don't worry. The adrenaline of the confrontation faded, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. Cooper was gone, escorted out by the very security team he had used to intimidate me on Friday. But he had left behind a smoking crater where our finances used to be. I sat in the CEO's chair, my chair now. It didn't feel like a throne. It felt like the captain's. Seat of the Titanic after hitting the iceberg. Status report, I said. It was 2:00 p.m. The entire executive team, minus the trader, was crammed into my office. The CFO, a nervous man named David who had been cowed into submission by Cooper, wiped sweat from his upper lip. It's bad, Brooklyn. Cooper moved $4 million to that holding account on Thursday. We tracked it. It's an offshore shell entity in the Caymans. We've flagged it as fraudulent, but the bank has frozen the assets pending a federal investigation. We can't touch that money for months. And payroll, I asked. Due Friday, David said grimly. We're short. If we pay the vendors, we miss payroll. If we pay payroll, Amazon shuts down our servers for non-payment. I looked out the window. The team outside was buzzing with the news of my return. They were celebrating. They had no idea we were days away from bouncing their checks. We are not missing payroll, I said firmly, and the servers stay up. We need $1 million by Thursday, David said. We don't have it. I looked at Carter, who was leaning against the wall, still looking effortlessly cool despite the chaos. How fast can we liquidate my personal assets? Carter raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. My savings, I said. My 401k, the stocks I have in other companies, everything. Brooklyn, Carter warned. That's suicide. If the company goes under anyway, you lose everything. You'll be destitute. If the company goes under, my reputation is dead anyway, I countered. I turned to David. Cut my salary to $1 a year, effective immediately, and cancel the executive retreat Cooper booked. Get refunds on the flights. Every cent counts. It won't be enough, David whispered. I took a deep breath. I have one more card to play. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Omni Corp. The competitor Cooper tried to sell us to. Connect me to the CTO, I told the assistant. When he answered, his voice was wary. Brooklyn, I heard about the shake-up. I know Cooper tried to sell you our IP illegally, I said, bluffing with confidence I didn't feel. I assume you don't want to be named as a co-conspirator in the inevitable SEC investigation. Silence on the other end. I can offer you a licensing deal, I said. Non-exclusive access to our compression algorithm. Legitimately, board approved for $2 million. Upfront, today. That's a steal, he admitted. Why? Because I'd rather partner with you than let a crook ruin my company, I said. Do we have a deal? Send the contract, he said. I hung up, I looked at the room. We just made payroll. David looked at me like I had just performed a magic trick. You just sold a license to the enemy. No, I smiled, feeling the old spark of engineering genius return. I sold them the current version. The patch Mike and I are deploying next week makes that version obsolete. They just paid $2 million for yesterday's news. The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. EtherStream didn't just survive the quarter, we thrived. The story of the founder who returned leaked to the press. I suspect Carter had a hand in that, and our user numbers skyrocketed. The licensing deal kept the lights on until the frozen funds were recovered. But for Cooper Peterson, the world collapsed. The life twist wasn't just that he was stealing, it was who he was stealing from. 2 weeks after the showdown, the FBI raided Cooper's penthouse. It turned out the holding account in the Caymans wasn't just for embezzled company funds. Cooper had been running a Ponzi scheme on the side, using his status as a CEO to lure in private investors, including some very dangerous people. When I stopped the sale to Omni Corp and froze the assets, his house of cards crumbled. He couldn't pay back his investors. I sat in the break room with Mike and the team, watching the news on the wall-mounted TV. Breaking news. Tech CEO indicted on 12 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. The footage showed Cooper being led out of a federal courthouse in handcuffs. He didn't look like the arrogant man in the bespoke suit anymore. He looked aged, disheveled, and terrified. His blazer was pulled over his head to hide from the cameras. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, Mike muttered, taking a bite of a bagel. He tried to sue us, you know, I told the table. He filed a wrongful termination suit last week. What happened? Jenna asked. Carter sent his lawyer a single email, I said. It contained the server logs showing he tried to sell the IP and a copy of Section 8. Carter reminded him that if he pursues the lawsuit, we will counterclaim for the $12 million he technically owes us for the breach of fiduciary duty. And they dropped the suit in 10 minutes, I laughed. The bonus pool I promised came through. Every employee got a check that changed their year. People paid off student loans. Why fix their cars? They felt safe again. We stripped Cooper's name from everything. The Peterson conference room became the Ada Lovelace room. We erased his legacy of fear and replaced it with a culture of ownership. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. The notification on my calendar for October 15th, vesting cliff, seemed like a lifetime ago. I didn't get the cash payout. I didn't get the quick $12 million. I got something better. I got the wheel. And this time, I was never letting go. I sat on the balcony of my new place. I didn't buy the mansion in the hills. I bought a nice, airy loft downtown, close to the office. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the skyline. A glass of wine sat on the table next to me, condensation beating on the stem. My phone was face down. The company was stable. The new algorithm was crushing the market benchmarks. Carter had come by earlier to celebrate our Q1 earnings. We had toasted to Section 8. He was currently representing 3 other founders who had realized their contracts were garbage and hired him to fix them. He jokingly called himself the Brooklyn Bailey of contract law. I took a sip of wine and looked directly at you. Yes, you. Porch wisdom. You know, people think revenge is about destroying your enemy. And sure, watching Cooper get walked out in cuffs was satisfying. But true revenge is succeeding in spite of them. I made a lot of mistakes. I thought that because I was the talent, I was safe. I thought that because I built the product, I didn't need to understand the politics. I was too trusting. I let a man in a fancy suit convince me that I was just a worker bee in my own hive. I ignored the red flags, the closed-door meetings, the shift in language from us to me. I let him isolate me. Don't make that mistake. Here is the lesson I learned the hard way. Your value is only as real as your leverage. If you are good at what you do, protect yourself. Read the fine print. Don't sign anything you don't understand, and never, ever assume that a company loves you back. A company is a machine. You have to be the operator, not the fuel. Do keep a Section 8 in your back pocket, a rainy day fund, a side hustle, or a legal clause that protects you. Don't ever let someone tell you that you are too emotional or too difficult just because you are asking for what you earned. Trust but verify, and always keep a lawyer like Carter on speed dial. If this story of justice touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. We're building a community of people who refuse to be victims. See you in the next one.